after hundreds of years of documenting where the moon was, when there was a new moon, how many days between one new moon and another. After hundreds of years, you can tell within a matter of a few minutes of how long the moon's rotation is, how long it takes the Earth to go around the sun. Now, speaking of astronomy, this very morning, there was an astronomical event. Did any of you happen to see it? I did, yeah. Blood moon. Yeah, I just got up at 4. I mean, I have to wake up. I don't really get that. I have to wake up. My wife reminded me of it. No doubt the sky was clear, and at 5 there was the moon unscathed. At 5:10, I noticed one side of the moon darkening. I wound up at 5:30 in my car. At 6, I stopped. It's a quick trip. Looked up, took pictures. So I got the pictures here on camera. There was the moon. By this time, it was all the eclipse was total. At 5:25 was total. I came here to the campus, looked up, and or something. I didn't find it once I got here. But anyway, it was a major event. It's called a blood moon. We're going to have 4 of these. This was the second blood moon. There's going to be 2 more within the next year. It's rare that we have 4 blood moons. These 4 blood moons coincide with 4 Jewish holidays. And folks, that's a very, very rare event. But anyway, now, the Mayans, like I say, they could have predicted it long ago had they wanted to predict that far in advance. Now, the Mayans also had a fascination with the planet Venus. Well, actually, the Mayan calendar started at 3114 BC. Now, does it say? Anyway, I don't see this here, so I'll. Oh yeah, yes, okay, yeah. The planet Venus in the evening sky was a time for them to prepare for war. They believed this cycle was 5,200 years old, and your book says in the year 2012 on the Western calendar, the Mayan cycle was to end, and supposedly a new one was to begin. Now, about the planet Venus, folk, there have been persons who said that the Mayans constructed a Venus calendar. Without the satellite, this is impossible. I mean, when I was young, they tell us we don't know how long it takes Venus to rotate on its axis. Well, today, thanks to our satellites which are sent there, we know that Venus is the only body in the solar system where the sun rises in the west and sets in the east. Their day is almost as long as their year. Yeah, Venus does, in fact, rotate, but it rotates really, really slowly in a completely what you call retrograde mode, or it rotates backwards from every other body in the solar system. There have been many theories as to why this is. Our studies of Venus do show that Venus once had a moderate temperate climate, had vast liquid oceans, and temperatures that are similar to Earth's temperatures, and something happened to it along the way. And there have been many theories as to what. One of the popular is the greenhouse theory, that Venus's clouds create a greenhouse effect, but others say no, greenhouse would not raise the temperature of the planet's surface to 800 degrees. Well, that's even harder than Mercury. 800 degrees, that melts both lead and tin. Again, we don't know, but Venus apparently once was almost, as far as we know, inhabitable by Earth people. So was Mars, for that matter. Mars once had vast liquid oceans and liquid rivers of liquid water flowing. This you can verify by doing some research on both planets. Anyway, if the Mayans had a calendar of Venus, it's a mystery how they got it, because without being able to see the surface features, it would be impossible. Alright, the Maya disappeared. Oh yes, I must state this. The Maya again practiced human sacrifice, as did all of these people. And the Maya had not disappeared by the time the Europeans arrived, but their culture was in a great state of decline, and it's possible that they had warfare among themselves. Now, again, your authors say, we used to believe the Maya were a very peaceful people. But then after studying some of their bodies, some of their skeletons, we have found that they, along with all the American Indians from Alaska down to Argentina, they never found a cure for warfare. Mankind has found warfare to be a constant, faced by almost every generation, and nobody knows the solution. The Maya were no exception. All right. Again, did the Maya decline because of wars, because of climate change, or because of revolts among them? Did the people, common people, rise up in rebellion? Now, about climate change, we now know what the Spanish discovered earlier. We know a little more about. There's a phenomena that starts in the Pacific called El Nino or La Nina. The El Ninos begin about 2 miles deep in the ocean, or they go that deep, and they extend up to about 20 miles above the surface, and they're an extreme warm mass of air that dominates all other air masses and moves all jet streams and all vortices. And they periodically and unpredictably experience El Ninos. We do not know what caused it. The El Nino might give way to a La Nina, climate change, a different kind. And again, we don't know what caused it. These might have contributed to the downfall of Maya. All right, Aztecs. The Aztecs apparently started out as a peaceful people living up here in northern Mexico, maybe in southern Texas. And they got to be powerful the same way that Rome did, the same way that Hammurabi did. They would conquer people and then get the conquered people on their side to help them fight other peoples. Genghis Khan, by the way, did the same thing. Convinced the conquered people, hey, you're good, you just happen to lose to the best, but you're really good and you're worthy fighters and we'd like to have you on our side. And fast forward to October 8, 2014, and I don't like to get too close to modern times, but the same thing might be happening in the world right now. A small group of people, you think, hey, over the weekend I just talked to my brothers who said, hey, ISIS is no threat to us. You can believe that if you want to, and I heard on the news this morning, ISIS goes after Turkey. Turkey's army is so many times bigger than ISIS. Well, we'll see. The problem is the rest of the world is not really friendly. But anyway, this is the way the Aztecs started, small and aggressive. The way Genghis Khan started, really, really small and aggressive. The way Hammurabi started, and the way many others have. And in short order, the Aztecs had taken over Mexico. Now, these people are remembered by us because a man named Cortez, a European, met them. The Aztecs were already known to be in a state of decline when Cortez came over, and if Cortez had not come, there was a really good chance that the empire of Montezuma was leading up. Now, when we're studying the Indians, folks, you don't find very many names of individuals because the records aren't there. You might find tribal name, but because he met Europeans, we do have a name of the Aztec leader at the time. Montezuma, sometimes spelled M-O-C-T, Moctezuma. Now, the Aztec are known to have been very authoritarian, and they fostered rebellion, and the rebellion might have led to the crumbling had not Cortez come in. Now, when Cortez heard about the Aztecs, he had already been to Florida and Cuba, so he got about 200 men on a couple of ships. When he got to Mexico, he told his men, okay, the folk, burn the ships. We're not going back home. We're either going to conquer this place or we're going to die doing it. Now that may seem foolish because after all, Cortez did have horses, and he did have cannon, and did have rifles. He did have armor, but he only had 200 men. The Aztecs had 100,000 men. All right, but there were about 4 or 5 reasons why the Aztecs lost. And here they are. Reason number 1, half of the Aztecs refused to fight. Half of Montezuma's army. Reason number two, Cortez collected tens of thousands of discontented Indians to where his army was almost equal in size to the army of Montezuma. I mean, at least part of Montezuma's army that fought. Reason number three, the Aztecs feared that the Europeans were gods and therefore immortal, especially when they saw a man on horseback with armor. They assumed that the horse and rider were one entity, one and the same. It was an entity with two heads. Horse and rider, two heads, with armor. And again, the Europeans appeared to be gods, so it was a fear factor. In other words, germ warfare, without meaning to. Cortez and his men spread typhus and smallpox. The American Indians had no resistance to any of that. Now, other peoples in the world, I mean, smallpox was the scourge of mankind for many, many hundreds of years. But eventually we noticed that persons who had cattle never got smallpox, particularly women who milked. Yes?
What was the second reason?
About Cortez. Let's see, one of them was half his army consisted of Indians. And probably not half, but most of his army, the big majority of his army consisted of Indians.
So he was sided with the Aztecs?
He didn't get he got the conquered peoples. Not the Aztecs generally did not side with him, but the conquered peoples, the Indians who were not Aztecs, who the Aztecs had conquered, they sided with Cortez.
To fight Montezuma?
To fight the Aztecs alongside of Cortez. All right, is this hard to understand? Simply
With
Cortez.
Montezuma?
What's that?
With Montezuma?
They fought Montezuma. Basically, Cortez rounded up tens of thousands of non-Aztec Indians to fight against the Aztecs and Montezuma, which is one reason why he won. Is that hard to understand?
And there was only 4 reasons, or was there?
4 reasons. Well, I'm getting one of them was germ warfare.
Right.
Another was the fear factor. They looked on them as being gods.
Right.
Another one was
Diseases.
the disease. Germ warfare.
Yeah.
Germ warfare.
None of the people were fine.
Yeah, they didn't. The American Indians did not have cattle. I think I mentioned that last class. Did not have cattle. If they would have had cattle, the cattle would have eventually built up some kind of immunity against smallpox. And in fact, this is how the smallpox vaccination came about. The cattle, persons who milk cows oftentimes get cowpox, but if you get cowpox, which is a milder form of smallpox, you don't get smallpox. Well, the Mexicans just simply were wiped out to where eventually 90% of the American Indians in Mexico were wiped out with smallpox. And I must say this, once Cortez had conquered, he enslaved both the Indians who had fought with him as well as the ones who fought against him. So the Aztecs, yeah. And then went ahead to enslave them all and slaughter them all. The Spanish mercilessly slaughtered the Indians as well as gave the Indians their diseases. Now, there have been stories that the Indians gave the Europeans some of their diseases also, most notably syphilis.
Yeah.
I've heard some stories that no, syphilis was already in Europe beforehand. I don't know for sure what to believe, but syphilis is believed to have been carried back to Europe by one of the crewmen on board one of Columbus's ships. And once in Europe, it spread like wildfire among certain segments of the population. No, not everybody got it, but certain segments. And European doctors quickly recognized how it spread. But it was to be many, many generations before they found a cure or any kind of treatment. And speaking of which, our diseases somehow seem to outpace us. So I have been told that syphilis today, the syphilis going on today cannot be cured. If you want to argue with that, you can. It's the same thing with gonorrhea. We think, folks, I mean, in 1960, I read an article in Reader's Digest about how great medicine would be in the year 2000. We would at that point have cures for all our diseases. Well, the year 2000 came and went, and guess what? In some ways, we're in worse shape now than we were in 1960. Disease still is a big problem in the world. Those of you who have your eyes open heard about it. But anyway, now, I've asked this question before. I'll ask it again. If you had been Cortez and you had heard the screams coming from the temple and been told, oh, these are people being offered as sacrifice, what would you have done?
Had some popcorn.
Well, you might think that, but I'll tell you what, this was before political correctness. So political correctness says, who's to say that one religion is better than another? If they want to do that to their own people, let them. Who's to question it? Cortez didn't act that way. Cortez went in and destroyed the Aztec Empire and killed the priests who were offering the sacrifices. Stopped the sacrifices. Again, he was imposing his Christian values on a conquered people. Whether right or wrong, each of you can decide for yourself. All right, I've got to move on. South America. Here's some of the things you want to remember about South America is the main tribe that I want you to remember is the Inca. These were the people who were conquering Pizarro. Now, the Inca, I-N-C-A. In order for the Inca chieftain to be spared, yeah.
What page are we on?
The Inca, I'm looking at page 75. Yeah, I jumped ahead fast. I-N-K-A. All right. I-N-K. The chieftain said, I can fill this room half full of gold as high as I can reach. This chieftain was a tall man. Anyway, he filled the room, and Pizarro, the European leader, killed him anyway. But this gold, folks, found its way to Europe, and for the first time since Roman times, Europeans had a lot of gold. Found its way into Spain, and from Spain it spread over Europe, and Europeans were able to get gold money again. Now, a couple of questions. Question number one is, where did this gold come from? And folks, nobody seems to know. Number two, was it morally right? Well, the question I have is, I've been told Europeans got ahead by stealing from the peoples. That still begs the question, how come if these people had all the wealth that they did not come to Europe and conquer the Europeans? They had the gold, they had all the wealth. Again, I'm not saying it was morally right, but what you had, folks, two sides of an ocean, one group of people living here, another group of people living here, inevitably they were going to meet one day. And human nature being what it is, the one group was inevitably going to be swallowed up by the other group. I mean, people have told, I've had students tell me, the Europeans should have stayed home. That's defying what human nature really is. If you had lived at the time, if you hadn't come over, your cousins would have, or your brothers or sisters would have. The fact is, there was a whole lot of wealth here, a whole lot of land, a whole lot of money to be made. Some Europeans stayed, most stayed, but you couldn't keep the rest away. It's just human nature being what it always has been. The stronger side swallowed up the weaker. Now, I must mention, and I may have to close, straight lines. And folk, even your authors digress a little bit, particularly the Nazca line. The book shows a picture of them. A lot of persons say that this kind of structure could not be built except from a vantage point of somebody looking down from orbit above the Earth. That, all right, the Indians did have balloons, but here's how they used it. They put dead bodies of people in a casket, attach the cat to a balloon and fly the balloon out into the Pacific Ocean, and the balloon would eventually run out of hot air and collapse, and this is the way they buried their dead. They didn't even think about using balloons to fly living people. But the balloons did not go high enough for them to create these kind of straight, super straight lines that resemble animals. I mean, this is just one example on page 175. How they build them, why, for what purpose? It's pure speculation. Now, I did not finish, that's okay. I do want to say one thing and then I'll quit. The Arawak, I'm looking at the bottom, page 180. The Arawak had their men and women as guinea equals. And you can guess the rest of it. The Arawak were extinct.